Welcome to the Ride This Out podcast, where we talk about how to improve your mental health and strengthen your connection to nature and your community, all through one simple solution: the bicycle. My name is Zach Golding, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and mental health therapist. I'll be your host as we discuss the power of pedaling. Welcome into this week's session. I talk with Emily Miller. Emily is a social worker from Chicago, Illinois. Emily also runs a Instagram account called Cargobikes, where they document her and her partners and her children's adventures on their cargo bikes throughout the city of Chicago and what it does for their family. This was a wonderful conversation to hear how they benefit so much from riding in their cargo bike and biking in general, how it gives them some respite and and the resistance that they feel from that, and the advocacy work that they do, and how it teaches their children. So great conversation. It was awesome to talk with a fellow social worker and just hear their amazing insights. So thank you, Emily, for sharing that. And if you have anybody that is interested in getting into cargo biking, or if you're interested in it, give this a listen, share this with them. And also they give us some great tips on biking in the cold weather and just biking with kids in general. So super fun. Enjoy this week's conversation and session with Emily. All right, Emily, thanks again for joining me on the podcast today. Just wanted to ask you to start off by introducing yourself, who you are, where you're from, and just all those good things. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much, Zach. It's great to be here. My name's Emily Miller. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm one half of a queer couple behind Cargobikes on Instagram. My other half is Pam. And so we live in Chicago. We've got 2 young kiddos. We've got a dog. And I'm here because we talk a lot about cargo biking. We talk to our friends, our family, our workplace. And we found that there's a platform and a space where people want to continue that conversation and seeing how it fits, even if every now and then or all the time in their lives. So we've got a box bike, a front loader Yuba Supermarché. We have a Turn HSD and a GSD, and we most often use it to take our kids around on fun little adventures.
I love it. Yeah. So what sparked the interest in cargo biking? Was it just something recently, or was it something that you both have been a part of biking a lot in the past? Or how did that interest come up?
Yeah. I love that question because I feel like there's so many different answers. And I actually had a funny experience recently as it relates to just how did you get into biking? I have never really called myself a biker. Pam or I neither have done that because it's always been very tied to commuting. I grew up biking on probably one of those really cheap Walmart bikes that get stuck in the highest gear. And so you're everywhere standing up like, crank, crank, crank. And I grew up biking to my job to go clean locker rooms at the local pool, right? I wasn't in a rush to get a driver's license. We had bikes as a commute. And when we did our graduate school work for social work, we both have our masters in social work. We did that out in Baltimore, which much love to Charm City out there. We'd bike to the farmers market we worked at in the morning or to our early shifts. And you got to see the city a whole different way. And if you don't know about Baltimore, it's really easy to get out of the city 10, 15 minutes and you're in a totally different environment. And we found a lot of respite and joy in that space. And then would go back to commuting to DC and hopping on a Capital bike share to finish the leg of our commute. And biking became such a source of respite and almost a source of resistance. Being a queer couple, when we got married, it wasn't legal and we had to upgrade to a foreign marriage when we were in Baltimore. It was really wild. But when we had kids, I didn't see it fitting in the same way. And, we'd toss one of those awesome Yep seats on the back of the bike, but it made it really top heavy. And I was always really curious. I'm kind of a tinkerer. I grew up in a family that would had construction. We'd build things. Um, but I remember figuring out there are cargo bikes. What is that? And falling down the rabbit hole of the internet and the Omnium bikes that have this really cool front platform with a small wheel below. You've got your long tails, your box bikes, and it finally happened that Cosmic Bikes, which is local to us, they are our neighborhood local bike shop. When I posted on a Facebook group being like, I'm just tossing out the ideas out here, they were like, hey, we have a floor model, and actually we'd love to get rid of it. It's taken up a lot of space. And that's where I got the Yuba Super Mache. And from there it was like, oh, this is just, it's wonderful. And so full circle, when I said I don't call myself a biker, I ran into an old colleague when we were living and working in Baltimore, and I would bike to work every day there. And I ran into her here, and she's like, hey, are you still biking? And I was floored that somebody associated me with biking, that and called me a biker. And it just absolutely, I was flabbergasted. So then I was finally like, I am a biker. It doesn't, even if it is just for a commute, I am a biker, and I find a lot of joy in that. And that's really, I think, how I finally was like, yeah, I'm definitely into biking.
I love it. Yeah, you don't really know you're part of that identity until someone points it out to you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. And I love the idea that you brought up there of respite and resistance.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, talk about that a little bit. Just the idea of what respite is, and also like the resistance that you feel, and like kind of what you're a
mm.
part of.
I think as a parent, and I think in general in life, you're in this go mode. If there's any silence, you need to fill that with something, whether it's right now you're listening to this podcast, right? An audiobook. I'm a big audiobook person. But cargo biking and biking gives you this chance for reflection that you don't get in other spaces, especially as a parent, very easily. It's not as accessible. And biking is so sensory. It's sensory for you, the driver, the rider, right? It's for the kids, your cargo, and it's transformative. I get to witness them from pickup to get home to be totally different little humans. And my wife always tells me, she's like, it checks these four boxes. By 9 a.m. when you come back, you have started your day with a sense of accomplishment, and that just catapults the rest of your day. And now that, of course, that's not a measure of your self-worth, right? But you did that. You started with a success. You got exercise, and I don't care if there's a battery or not. You got out there. You did it. You completed the commute, right? The kids got there safely. You got to be out in the weather. You got outside, and so it's a respite almost from your daily grind, because a commute. You never get that time back. But a commute on a bike, it's an accomplishment every time you get out the door.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, whenever I love that the idea of like checking those boxes and just getting out there, moving. It helps in so many aspects, and yeah, just for the kids as well. And yeah, so you brought
Yeah.
up the idea of resistance too, right? Like,
Hmm.
what does that mean for your family and for you, like as you're biking?
Oh my goodness. So what cracks me up as well is, being a queer couple, sometimes I'm like, am I queer enough? Um, am I too hetero? Right? You get into. I think there's a lot of politics related to where identity is, and I will recognize I have an incredible amount of privilege as a white woman, female presenting person, or pretty ambiguous, frankly. But having access to a cargo bike is not something many people have access to, and that is something I want to acknowledge. Um, and through that, I feel like I can be resistant to the grind, but it's political. So every time you're taking up space on the streets, you're taking up space to park your bicycle wherever that may be, you are challenging the norm. So when we had our second kid, we really fell into the common idea of, well, we need a second car. And we need it to be an SUV, clearly, right? Two kids, dog, two parents, right? It was during the pandemic, and car loans were pretty good. So we got a Subaru Ascent, and so we had this 2012 Honda Fit. Love that car. Every single panel's dented. It was insulting how much they offered us. So we're like, we're going to keep it. So we have two cars. And after seeing that SUV just take up space, every time I drove it, I'm like, this is a gas guzzler. I feel guilt having it exist in our possession. And I that feeling carried with me. So everyone we talked to was like, oh, you got a second car. That's awesome. So when we told them we sold our car, they're like, good, it was time. That thing was an old car. You didn't need it. Oh my gosh. And then when I told them, no, we didn't sell the Honda Fit, which by the way, love that car, fits everything. We sold the Subaru Ascent. They did not have words. They could not understand it. Truly didn't commute. It didn't translate. And so sometimes biking, cargo biking is resistance to the norm. It's an added layer of just pushing back on. I just think it's an opportunity to advocate. It's an opportunity to advocate for safety, for wellness, that everyone has a space here. You belong in the biking community. You belong in whatever way that looks like for you. And for me, that's where the resistance parts come in. Every time I push a pedal, I'm like, I'm part of something bigger. Um, and and I just think that adds to purpose.
Yes, I I get that a lot. I love. There's nothing better than riding our cargo bike with our kids on the back and just blowing by cars that are like parked, like that are
Yeah.
just stuck in a traffic jam, and you're just flying by them like, here we are. This is what we're doing, and we're getting there, and we're having fun, and we're getting there faster. That's just something. It's not about speed, but it's just about that feeling of like we're doing this. It's the best.
Hmm. Yeah. And the kids are such a part of that too, the advocacy. So I was so proud of our older kid. There was a block party and the older person came, and our older kid was like, who is that? Who are they? We explained their role, and they're a decision maker, a gatekeeper. They're somebody who has influence over the shape of our society, right? And so, you can go to that person and talk about what's important to you. And so my kid goes up and says, hey, there are too many cars in the bike lane. You need to do something about it. And at the time, our kid was 4. And
Wow.
I'm blown away. So it is, as you're biking, you are talking to your kids, or and they're seeing more and they're engaging with all of the senses that present, right? The wind, of course, but the people, right? The crossing guards, the cars who don't stop. Why don't they stop, right? We belong here, and cars and people do too, but how can we create a space that is safe and welcoming for all those folks? So I think the resistance really translates to our kids, and it allows opportunity to talk about, honestly, privilege, power, um, and reporting people in bike lanes. I talk all about, if I stop and take a picture, what are you taking a picture of that car for? I'm going to report that bike lane obstruction and bike lane uprising. Or I'm going to put that in for 311 and request an install of a bike rack. Um, so it's also an accountability partner for me, because your kids hear everything and they're going to hold you to it. And sometimes it's, frustrating, but I think it's something to be quite thankful for.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah, and I saw on your Instagram, your little highlight reel of the year. You guys, or you all did a really like a lot of different rides for like different parades and stuff, kind of advocating for different stuff. Have you been? How's the community out there as far as biking and just being involved with all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. There's some great critical mass, and they, especially in the summer, but also outside of summer, there's our every neighborhood, many of them have a critical mass. And so I love critical masses, because a cargo bike is it's a library. It is it's a picnic. A cargo bike it's Narnia. It's a nap. This is a great napping machine, but it's truly Narnia for kids. And so critical mass is like that on steroids in the best way. Everyone around you is geeked up about bikes in some way. And so you get to see, oh, how did you get a snack thing to fit there? Oh, I love the way you decorated your helmet. And by the way, hey, let's all go talk about how we can improve this, or talk about, is this helpful or not helpful in the community? And so it's a great way to build awareness and also model for kids how to engage. My favorite thing are critical masses. You can always find another cargo biker there. I love the community in Chicago. Um, while we do a lot of commutes to and from the Dunk House, which is a German American cultural center where our kids go to care right now, that neighborhood, there's just a lot to do there. A lot of neighborhoods have a lot of things to do. And they just installed, or they just redid a whole section of Lawrence Avenue, brand new asphalt. I mean, they tore this place up, and they just put painted bike lanes in that people speed through. So in terms of the type of rides we do, we love critical masses. That's our favorite. We do a lot of commuting, but last summer there were 3 people killed in 1 month in June, one of which was a toddler. I believe she was 3. And so there was a memorial ride for her. And it's because ComEd parked, which is a power company, they parked in the bike lane. So the parent went out into the lane to pass, and then it was that she was hit, and the child did not live. So whenever possible, if there's a way to participate in safety and advocacy, definitely want to do that as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely the first and foremost thing when you're riding bikes with kids. Yeah, you always got to be advocating for those safer streets and being as careful as you can. It's always a scary and hard thing. That's what everyone approaches us about when we're riding our bikes with our
Hmm.
kids. Is like, I can't believe you're out there. I would, and they always say, I would be out there too if it was safer. And then that strikes up the conversation. Well, this is how we can make it safer. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I wish in those, and it's not the stats that do it, like the Bikeonomics book. I forget who wrote that. I'm reading that now. It's really good. But you in some ways you are safer on your bike than in your car. I am don't have the research behind that, but there's so many statistics that talk about the risks of driving, if you will, or you're more likely to be hit. All that to say, you are so vulnerable as our biker, and there's so much victim blaming and shaming um, in bikers. Oh, you're riding an e-bike. Oh, you're not wearing a helmet, right? All these things, which yes, defensive driving is so important, and being a smart biker. But you can do everything right, and if someone's driving over 40, the chance of you getting killed or critically injured is severely more than if someone's driving 25. And I absolutely and have understand people who are reluctant or nervous about biking in any way, shape, or form, especially with kids and anywhere near a street. So I understand there's a massive barrier for people, which is fair.
Yeah. Yeah, how's the bike infrastructure out there in Chicago? Is there a lot of like protected lanes? Is there pathways? How do you mostly get around?
I recently watched a video where somebody rode 8 miles in Chicago before they saw their first bike lane. And it was a painted, bike gutter. I
Wow.
really think Chicago, with so much of its racist segregation history and the redlining, that honestly, a lot of bike lanes might mirror some of that, where we invest in more white affluent neighborhoods than the majority of neighborhoods. So I think it really depends on where you bike. So some places do have protected bike lanes. Um, some don't. Some have kind of the buffer. I think it's just a wide variety. We have the wonderful Lakeshore Drive bike lanes, although lately cars have been getting onto theirs on accident, because it's not, cars just do what cars do. So I do think there is some really wonderful infrastructure, but there's so much work to do, because I just don't think Chicago's following best practices, uh, things that actually are more than green paint on pavement.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely. And that's one thing that we talk a lot about. Paint isn't protection.
Hmm.
But at least it signals to the drivers, at least it signals to other people like, hey, we belong and we can be here. But yeah, it's definitely not the most protected aspect of it. I want to circle back around again on this the critical mass. Will you explain a little bit of what that is to the listeners? What a critical mass type of event is? I think they're amazing, but I want to hear it from your perspective.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Critical mass, first off, it's magic. It's absolute magic. Basically, you take over the streets and it allows, it's a very slow-paced ride. It's a very low mileage ride. Usually it will start and end at a playground, right? We had a pit stop at a little area so the kids could pick berries once, which was really uh, just fascinating, a really good time. Um, and so it's typically organized by a volunteer, a parent, somebody in that neighborhood, and you bike 2 miles, let's say, mostly on slower streets, minimal crossings on major streets, because the goal is that you've got kids biking. So when my kiddo learned to ride a pedal bike, um, we carried our bikes on the Cargobikes, got her ready, and she went and biked the whole thing. She fell off once, scraped her knee, took a breath, got back on, and everyone stays together. And grown-ups will, what do they call it? Like, they'll plug each intersection, so they'll stop to make sure cars stop until the whole group is through. And people are designated in the front and the back to make sure no one's left behind. And again, it's a slow pace, so it's a great way for kids to practice without being on a narrow sidewalk or with a lot of intersections they have to stop at, unless of course there's a red light. So critical mass is just to raise awareness that there are bikers out there of all ages, and bikes, large, small. I was biking next to somebody from Blazing Stars, this like homeschool in this neighborhood over, and he's riding one of those tall bikes that's like two bikes welded together. And I'm just sitting there in awe because I think that's incredible. So critical mass, it's oftentimes there's costumes or themes, and you don't have to be part of that neighborhood to go. The whole goal is just to have fun, slow down, get those kids feeling confident, and build awareness so drivers can see bikers out on the road. So if there's one by you, oh my goodness, please go. You will not regret it. Even if it's winter cold, it's a blast.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and I think it's definitely a spin off of Critical Mass, right? Like the Critical Mass rides that they have. I think it's like the last Friday of every
Yeah.
month. Different cities organize them, right? And Chicago has a pretty big Critical Mass scene. I've seen that. I've seen some of the videos out there. You guys, have you all ever joined that ride before?
We haven't made it because we'd have to get a babysitter, and that's why critical mass is great, because they're at usually, they're not at 8 in the morning, but they'll be like at 10, which kids are up for, right? So that's where I think it's a great outlet, because a lot of times advocacy doesn't have childcare, right? And that's a huge barrier for people in all forms of advocacy. And so critical mass is a way to be more engaged with your community and learn about advocacy, frankly, without having to not bring your kids. So it's a great model for your kids to get involved in advocacy. And I just love it for that reason as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah, you brought up the cold weather biking. I live in Utah. It gets pretty cold out here, but I hear it's nothing compared to Chicago and some of those icy cold mornings. How do you all do it? How do you do how do you ride in the cold weather? What's the secret? What's the tips?
Oh my goodness. The secrets and tips, by the way, I think are some of the best discussion points when connecting with others. How did you do this? How did you finagle that? Because while I love the idea of getting a wind barrier shield, I haven't been able to get one yet. So, and also some people don't prefer those because it makes you a bit of a sailboat, right? My go-to are those neck gaiters. They go around your neck, they go around your head, and having those on the kids, and then ski goggles, winter helmets, and when you don't feel well, and you can heat up that rice in a sack, and it's just like a warm thing.
Yeah.
They make them stuffies. Heat up some of those, and your kids can hold those. But I think the tip, honestly, is first, whether you're taking a car, a bike, public transit, getting your kid out the doors, it's hard. It's the hardest challenge usually of the day, trying to make that deadline. So my tip is set some stuff out before, get everything you need ready in terms of like the gear. Um, so that you've got them really, they're ready to step into the bike upon walking out, because otherwise, um, if you don't have their snow pants on and there's snow out, they're going to go and make that snow angel right when you turn around. And now their whole layer is all wet. And I'd also add, my tip is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. If you don't cargo bike, or if you don't bike every single day, that's okay. Because winter's brutal. And it's one thing for you to choose to bike because your body's going to warm up, right? I have a harder time with kids without the windshield, for example. If it's under 30, I am not giving myself any guilt if we don't bike. And that's a huge privilege that I'm thankful to have. But I think it's allowing yourself permission that it's okay. You don't need to beat yourself up. And I think that's the important mental health thing. Biking should be a positive source for you. And I know you're going to feel better once you do it, but you shouldn't do it at a sacrifice.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's been some times when we've had to drive and I'm like, we could totally bike this. Like, why aren't we biking? And then I'm like, what if the other bike people see us driving? You know, like they're gonna be like, what are you doing in your car? So yeah, just all those thoughts definitely we can kind of get caught up in those absolutely as we're trying to bike as much as we can and feel the benefits of it. But you also got to be realistic and especially with kids, absolutely those are great points.
Yeah.
So, with you guys, I one of the things that really stuck out to me, with your family is the sleds that you pull, with your bike. I thought that was so awesome. That brought back so many childhood memories of, yeah. Explain the idea behind that and just rigging up some sleds to your bike.
I'm so glad you bring that up. First off, it is the biggest parenting win. Like anytime I'm like, oh, parenting is hard, I just am like, ah, I did that and I feel great. But no, so I got winter tires last year for the first time on the front loader Super Miche, the Yuba. And so kind of like a pickup truck, I thought it'd be a good idea to put a kid in the front for sandbagging so the front wheel has some weight on it. And then I got one of those on guard, like a cables, and I just wrapped that around the back tail so I don't have a formal anything like that. And then I just attached dog leashes or the sled pull to that cable. And I would pull one, two, or three kids. And we're right across the street from Chicago Public Park. And it was just not plowed the right amount. So you still had some grip on either the asphalt um, or grass. And we would just do laps. We would do laps and they'd switch one kid in the front, go to the back and switch up. And it was the best day ever. Um, we all got the stomach flu this year right when all the snow landed, so I didn't get to do it this year, but I'm like itching and ready um, for sled mania because it's so fun. So it is you don't need a fancy attachment. You just need something that you feel comfortable. Like I would suggest going once around the loop you plan to do without the sleds, or start with one sled at a time, and then go from there. And also, if you fall over, there's snow. It's a little bit more forgiving. So have fun. I mean, that's sledding. You're gonna fall. That's what happens. But I only fell on the bike once when I cut a corner too much because we were just having too much fun, and it was all right.
I love it. It definitely gave us some good ideas. In fact, I was showing that video to my son, who's 6 years old, and he was asking all the questions. How do they not slip? Like, how are they riding on the ice? How are they hooking up the sleds? And I was like, let's look at this. Let's look this up. So yeah, it definitely gave us some ideas and what fun memories for your kids to have too. That's amazing. I think that's such a great idea.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I hope you get a video of that too. That'll be a blast.
Absolutely. Well, Emily, you touched on a lot of great points. As far as just like, your mental health, your overall wellness. Again, you talked about some other things. Just wanted to give you another opportunity to kind of talk about like what else it helps you do, like as far as biking and just kind of how it brings that mental wellness for you and for your family.
Yeah. I think that for me, when I start to feel resistance, I am finding myself making excuses. I don't need to. I'm just feeling resistant. I or my spouse will say like, you're going to have fun out there. You're going to start your morning off better. as long as you've set yourself up with food and water, right, you've got what you need. The hardest part with anything, of any type of habit change or any type of thing you're trying to do, is getting out the door, right? Showing up and doing that. So for me, if I the night before look at the weather, right? So I'm kind of reducing my decision fatigue in the morning, being like, all right, it's planning to be above 30, right? Cool. I'm just kind of planting seeds because I always feel better. You get this, again, I try to cram my space when I'm driving. I'm going to listen to an audiobook um, if the kids aren't there. But when the biking, once I've dropped off the kids and I bike home, it's just me. And even if you've got a crummy experience with a car because it's a commute, like cars exist, they're going to cut you off, they're going to do the things. It's amazing how quickly that disappears versus when I'm in a car and you've got some road rage thing or some frustration, it takes longer to go away. But when I bike, 2 blocks later, I'm like, most often I'm over it. My scenery has changed, my senses have changed. Um, I found something cool in a store window I'm going by. I had a cool interaction with the crossing guard. My kids waved and rang their bell at every single dog they see, which is awesome. And so it's just an opportunity to invest in yourself and your wellness. If you can get out the door, I've never regretted biking.
Yes,
So that's my go-to.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, I was noticing that the other day. You bring up a great point as far as when we dwell on, when you're in a car, a lot of times we're dwelling on those negative interactions that we have in a car, and it just sticks with us, and it just kind of piles on. But yeah, on a bike, as you're riding and you're just kind of processing it, you're absolutely right. Like a couple blocks later, it seems to be, yeah, just not such a major issue anymore. So I love that. That was such a great point. So, well,
Thanks.
yeah, Emily, thank you so much again, for sharing your story, for sharing different tips and advice. I know that this is inspiring for me to get out and ride a lot more with my family on our cargo bike, but hopefully it will inspire some other people as they're thinking about getting into it as well. So where can people find you on Instagram, or anything else that you guys that your family does?
Yeah, so if anyone's in Chicago, please reach out. We're on Instagram. It's Chicago Bikes. It's like Chicago, but cargo, Chicago Bikes. And we just look forward to connecting. So, Zach, thank you so much for having me. I feel inspired. I should probably go bike tomorrow for the commute. So thank you for holding me accountable to
Yeah,
it.
no, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, uh your family definitely is a fun follow on Instagram. We're looking forward to keeping tabs on you, definitely. But again, thank you so much, Emily, and have a great night.
You as well. Thanks, Zach.
All right, thanks.